Right, I think we'll get started because I know that we have got a lot to try and fit in today's session. So thank you everyone for joining. I'm Laura and I've worked with Technium for quite a number of years now, probably around 10 years. I've been in cybersecurity for over 20 years now, a range of from small startup to large global enterprises, critical national infrastructure. So security's changed a lot over that period of time. And today's topic is Canaries. So early warning breach detection. So let's get going. Why Canaries? So historically, Canaries were used by miners. They would take them down into the mines, and Canaries are well renowned for liking to sing. So they're very noisy, which is great because you don't have to pay attention to them. But they're also affected by any sort of toxic gas a lot quicker than human beings. So if the Canaries went quiet, it was very simple. You knew that you needed to evacuate the mine so that people weren't affected. Interestingly, I think they were actually used in mines in the UK up until the mid-1980s, so relatively recent in the big scheme of things. And they did have little oxygen feeds so that they could pump oxygen into their little cages as they came out, so that the Canaries were okay. But anyway, so Canaries in security. The concept is very much the same. Basically, the canary is something that, in the reverse, sits there quietly, but chirps when it needs to. So it's a decoy. It's basically something that gets deployed. It could be a fake file server, a file, credentials, something on the websites that you know whether your website's being copied. But once it's touched, it sends you an alert. So there's no legitimate reason for why someone would be going to look at these files or these links or, interact with them in any way. So in effect, when something happens with them, you know that you need to go and investigate it. There are sometimes legitimate reasons. It might be that there's some scanning going on and you can get rid of that noise, but generally you need to go and investigate it, even if it's just a nosy user who's decided to have a poke around the place. But absolutely, if they trigger, investigations needed. So why do teams add Canaries? Well, anyone that's worked in security for any period of time, they know that we have loads of tools. It's loads of noise that's generated. You need to look for anomalous behavior, and therefore this is really the reverse. It's something that's really quiet, and the only time that they make a noise, you know that you need to go and investigate them. And that's why it acts as an early warning quite often, because these make the noise before SOC teams have had a chance to go through all of the logs and figure out what's actually happening. So it complements what you already have. It sits alongside your SIEM, your EDR, your SOC services. They're fairly easy to deploy, fairly low maintenance. It's more a case of deciding what the right use cases are for you, tracking what you've got deployed, understanding what logging you need on to then do the investigation afterwards. And there's a wide variety of implementations that you can put out there. So we have Sam on the call. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Sam because he's going to take you through the deployment of a Canary and actually show you the alerts happening in real time and some actual use cases of them.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I will take over presenting quickly and share my screen. All right, folks. You should see my screen now. I'll kick it off for us. Yeah, any questions, please throw them in the chat, and then we'll answer it there as well as we go. Thank you very much for the introduction. I promise no canaries will be harmed in the presentation today. We won't gas any of them, but they are super effective at detecting bad things, and I'll show you that today. So the whole idea with canaries, they're honeypots in essence. And the idea is to detect attackers before they've got a chance to dig in. So there's always this risk that someone might breach the environment, might get on the network. It's kind of hard to detect often. We rely on signatures. Canaries don't rely on signatures, they rely on intent. Someone trying to access something they never ever should. which becomes a very clear signal. I've got a couple of examples on my screen there of big entities with amazing security teams. They didn't know about attackers on their network for an extended period of time. So that's what we're trying to solve with Canaries, is detecting those attackers, those threats super early. That means reducing the dwell time that they remain undetected. So the quicker you can detect an attacker, obviously the less damage they can do, but it's also a lot easier to kick them out of the network if they haven't had a lot of time, to set up systems. So the way we do that with Canaries, they're honeypots. If you think about how an attacker moves across an environment, they obtain some kind of foothold in the network. And from there, they look for other systems that they can exploit. They look for services they can interact with, and they extend their access in the environment. That pattern is kind of always the same. So with Canaries, with honeypots, you deploy them alongside your existing infrastructure. And now when an attacker lands and they start moving laterally, they're going to bump into a Canary and that's going to fire off an alert. So you're going to end up getting this high fidelity alert. If a Canary is set up to look like a Microsoft SQL database, that looks attractive to attackers. They want to interact with that. They want to connect to the database. They want to download stuff or a Windows file share, but no one should be interacting with those services. It's a honeypot, so you get a very clear signal. I'll show you today how we, trigger some alerts, what that looks like. And of course, these signals, these alerts can feed off into your own monitoring platforms. There's various ways that you can consume them using your existing tools, and we'll go through a few examples. All right, I'm going to pause the slides there, and we can have a look at some Canaries in action. So what you'll see on my screen here on the right-hand side, I've got a terminal. I'll use that to simulate an attacker on the network. I've got 2 hardware Canaries on my desk over here that I'll use for the demonstration. We do also have virtual Canaries, so VMware or Cloud Canaries. They all work the same way. And then to the left here, we've got the management console. So from here, you can manage your Canaries, breadcrumbs, and tokens. I'll also cover what tokens and breadcrumbs are during the course of today's presentation. But for now, I'm just going to start with the Canaries, the honeypots. The 2 that I've got here on my desk, these 2 in the console. The one that's powered on is emulating a Cisco router. So it's pretending to be a Cisco device. And this one hasn't been deployed yet, so I'll show you what the deployment looks like. To kick it off, I'm going to grab the IP address of the one that's currently powered on, head over to the terminal and pretend to be an attacker for a second. So I'm going to run a port scan. Attackers on the network that are looking for services they can interact with, doing some reconnaissance. We can see alerts popping up in the console. So a host port scan was detected. Got a timestamp of the event. There is the Canary that detected that activity, and then the source IP address of the attacker, so where they're coming from on the network. Super useful info. Now you know someone's on the network doing reconnaissance, shouldn't be port scanning. If we have a look at what the attacker would be seeing at this point, open ports. So there's SSH, Telnet, there's a web server they can interact with on port 80. The MAC address correlates with Cisco hardware, and the OS was identified as iOS 15.1. So it looks like a Cisco router over the network, but it's all emulated. There's no actual Cisco software running on this. You don't have to worry about vulnerabilities. It's emulated. We can make it look like anything. Now, if an attacker wants to interact with it further, let's say they want to maybe log in over Telnet, open up a connection, it's going to talk Telnet, and as soon as someone tries to authenticate, that gives us that clear signal that something bad is happening. No one should be trying to log into this device, but attackers don't know that it's a decoy. So you get this Telnet login attempt alert. I've got a timestamp of when it happened. You can see where the attacker is coming from. And if we expand the details, we can see the credentials they're trying to use to access the device, which can be super useful if the attacker might have compromised valid credentials earlier on and they're trying to reuse it on the network. So it gives you a sense of how much access they might have. All right, I'm going to clear these alerts and we can have a look at deployment quickly. So this one over here hasn't been deployed yet. With the hardware Canaries, you'll have a tracking link in the console. If you click that, it takes you to DHL. You can see where the Canary is as we ship it over to you. And then when it arrives, you connect it to power and Ethernet. So I've done that now. You can see it's busy booting up for the first time, and it'll automatically connect to the console. So we pre-enroll them before we ship them out, making it super easy to deploy. It requires Ethernet and power. That's it. Deployment's done. We can see this one is now online. It's emulating a Windows server. So if I grab its IP address, and just like before, click off a quick port scan, we're going to see different services. Same alerts popping up, the port scan alerts. There's one new alert here, consolidated network port scan. So because the attacker touched at least one port on 2 different devices, that triggered this consolidated network port scan alert. So even if attacker is going slow, trying to be sneaky, only touching a single service like 445 across a big range, they touch 2 canaries, that's going to give you that high fidelity signal that something bad is happening. Different services on this one. There's a Windows file share. We can see remote desktop is running on it. MAC address correlates to Hewlett-Packard, and OS is Windows Server 22. If I open up something like a RDP client, so remote desktop, try and connect to it, it's going to talk RDP. And again, as soon as someone tries to log in, which no one should ever be doing, that is going to trigger an alert for us. So there we can see a RDP login attempt was made, source IP address, admin user being used, got all those details. All right, next up, I'm going to show you configuration. So super easy to deploy these canaries. If you want to change what it looks like, really, really easy. The one we just deployed now, this one emulating a Windows server, we go to configure, and all the options are on this one page. I'll do a quick config change. So let's turn this into a NAS device. So like a Synology NAS. So I'm going to rename it to NAS. Location, this one is sitting in Sam's office. Just a friendly reminder of where you've placed it. Can be different geographic locations or offices. And then I'm going to choose a different canary personality. So these are the templates for quickly changing what your canary looks like on the network. Windows, you've got IIS, domain controllers, SharePoint, lots of different file share options. They work really well. Linux, you have a couple of flavors like CentOS, Oracle, Red Hat, can do OS X emulation, various networking kit to emulate as well. Attackers love these. There's no EDR on a Palo Alto firewall. If attacker can get hold of that, it's super useful for them. Vendors, again, you're going to see lots of services here that are super attractive to attackers. Getting access to Confluence internally or Jira. You can even do an IBM mainframe if you want. Lots of options here. I'm going to go with a Synology Destation 5. Let's go with that one. That then sets the IP stack. So the operating system it's going to emulate, the MAC prefix, all of this gets set for us already. If we scroll down, you'll see everything is a toggle switch. You want port scan detection on or off, super easy. Services associated with that personality would be configured for us. So it's going to have a web server on port 80 with a Synology NAS login page. SSH would be enabled on it. FTP will be running on port 21. It's a NAS device and network attached storage, so it's going to have a Windows file share on it. You can make the file share look attractive to attackers, try and get some engagement. So let's say generate industry-specific file tree. Let's choose an industry, do it nice and quick. Let's say biotech, hit OK, and that'll automatically generate a Windows file share for you with some files inside of it. You can come and right-click and rename or delete files or add your own files. You can upload files if you want. The idea is we just want to make it super quick and easy to set these up. Forget about them. They're going to do their work quietly in the background, and they look really attractive to attackers. All right, I'm going to go down to the bottom and hit deploy, and that's it. So instead of emulating a Windows server, it's going to get an update, reboot, and it's going to emulate a Synology NAS device on the network. There's a couple of tricks we do to make deployment of Canaries super easy. I won't go into too much of the details here, but Canaries use DNS as a channel to communicate with the console, which means when you're deploying Canaries, you don't have to configure your firewall to allow access to the console or worry about setting up network proxies. Canaries will talk to your internal DNS servers. Those DNS servers resolve external domains, and that's how it communicates with the console to send alerts, to receive updates. which makes deployment super easy because DNS works in most environments, and then Canaries can work and communicate with the console. Right. Just to show you where you could set up alerts and integrations. So at the top here, we've got global settings. This is where you could set up things like email notifications if you want to send them into different mailboxes, SMS, all of this can be set up over here. We've got an API on the console. You can use the API to generate different API keys to interact with the console to automate actions or retrieve data. Webhooks. So if you want to push the alerts you've been seeing into a Slack channel or Teams, super easy to do. Ignored IPs and ports. So Laura actually touched on this very lightly. If you've got vulnerability scanners or asset discovery tools, things that are going to scan your environment and touch Canaries, that would obviously trigger alerts when they're interacting with Canaries. So as part of onboarding, you would just define your vulnerability scanners, any kind of things that are authorized to scan your environment, add them in here, and then we're not going to generate any alerts from that. And then we do also support SAML with various identity providers for managing user access to the console. Those are the main settings on the console. If I go back to the main one here, I can see the update has finished. This one is now emulating a Synology NAS device. So again, I'll just grab its IP address quickly, run another port scan. So again, pretending to be an attacker, get those port scan alerts again. This time we can see different services. It's FTP, SSH, web server on 80, the Windows file share we configured on that Canary, and we can see the operating system has changed, Synology Destination Manager 5.1. If I open up a browser, and we go and browse to that Canary, you're going to see that Synology NAS login page, and as you'd expect, if anyone tries to log in here, that's going to trigger an alert for us. HTTP login attempt was made. I've got the full post request so we can see the username, password, user agent, all the details here, and obviously, most importantly, the source IP address where that request is coming from. Now we know attackers love targeting Windows file shares, so let's connect to that SMB share, open up a connection to it. Now, again, we get prompted for credentials. I'm going to go in with a guest account, but you can domain join Canaries. Then it would offload this authentication to Active Directory, which means you'll be able to see which AD accounts are trying to access files on the share. If I just go in with a guest account, there you can see we're connected to the share. We can see the data that was generated for us, all those files. Everything was done automatically for us in the background, so it's super quick to set this up. And as soon as an attacker tries to access any of these files, because they might look interesting, might look attractive to them, you're going to get this alert. File was opened on that share, on that IP address, and we can see exactly what file was accessed. The guest account was used in this case, but if it's domain joined, you'd see the domain account and the remote SMB machine name. So the attacker's computer name in this case. Right. Next up, I'm going to talk a little bit about different types of Canaries and then go over to breadcrumbs and tokens just to show you that functionality as well. So we'll clear out these. Right. So I've been demonstrating on the hardware Canaries. We do also have virtual Canaries. So if I go add Canary over here, you'll see the licenses I have assigned on my console. VMware, Hyper-V, Cloud Canaries, they all have the same functionality as the hardware Canaries, just different platforms that you're deploying to. They're managed exactly the same way, configured the same way. Now, if you want to make your Canaries more discoverable in your environment, you can use breadcrumbs. So the idea behind breadcrumbs is that these are little files that you can download and place on existing assets, your workstations, your servers, that point to a service on a Canary. So for example, we might have a SSH key breadcrumb. Select a Canary that is running SSH. Let's say our Cisco router Canary, it's pretending to be a Cisco router. And now we can set a reminder. So let's say I am going to place this SSH key and config that's pointing to a Canary on Sam's laptop on my machine. And I'm going to add in the path where I want to save it. I create it. that now gives me example SSH config that I can add to my system. Let's go and see where I am right now. Yep. So if we have a look at the SSH config on my machine, I've got this entry in already. I've already saved the private key. You can see it over here. So the idea would be that if an attacker compromises my machine, they're going to find the SSH private key. They're going to find this config. They're going to think, I can log into this core router. I've got all the details I need. As soon as they try and do that, we're going to get two very interesting alerts. So let's try and log in there. There we can see a SSH key breadcrumb was used. So that specific breadcrumb that we dropped on Sam's machine, on Bogon 2, that's my machine name there, that was used to log in. And obviously we've got the login attempt itself. So you can see the source IP address of where the attack is coming from. And so the idea with breadcrumbs is you can deploy hundreds of thousands, millions of breadcrumbs if you want. You can lay traps everywhere in your environment for an attacker to stumble across. There's no additional cost for breadcrumbs or for Canary tokens, which brings me on to the next topic. So Canaries, honeypots, they're on the network. They're fantastic at detecting lateral movement, attacker interaction, and they're really easy to deploy and configure. Breadcrumbs over time, seeding them across your environment, they point to Canaries. And then the final piece of the puzzle is Canary tokens. These are kind of similar to crumbs. There are files, again, that you can drop on endpoints that trigger an alert when they're opened or used. But the important thing to note with breadcrumbs and with tokens is they don't require agents to be installed. So you don't need software running on endpoints or servers. These are just static files that you drop, and they trigger an alert when they're opened or when they're used. So when I go to Canary tokens, you're going to see there's lots of different options here. I'm going to generate a few tokens to show you examples. I'll start with a Word document token because it's nice and visual. So the idea is we might create a Word document token, set a reminder, this is going on Sam's laptop. We could always add in the path, more details. For now, the important part is that you have a reminder in that tells you where you placed this token. So I create it, download the token. And in a moment, we'll see we've got our first Canary token. So over here. Now, that's not a very interesting name, so let's change it. Not very creative tonight, so let's say passwords 2026, backup, oopsie, and I leave that on my system. Now, if anyone was to compromise my machine, steal a whole bunch of documents, as soon as they open up this Word document, that's going to trigger an alert in the console with that reminder. So now we know this document only existed on Sam's laptop. Someone had to have gained access to the system to find this document, to open it up, and then instant response would kick it off and take it from there. So you can be alerted if someone has compromised that specific system, that endpoint where this token exists. There's no additional cost for Canary tokens, and you can generate unlimited tokens across your infrastructure. I'm manually creating them through the console now, but you can use the API as well to automate deployment, and lots of folks do that. So many people have thousands, some have millions of tokens across their infrastructure that they've automated using tools like Jamf or Microsoft Intune to automate the deployment of unique tokens across the infrastructure. I'll show you one or two other examples and then wrap up and open up for questions. So with the tokens, some of the very popular tokens we have are credential-based, so things like AWS API keys. Again, set a reminder, Sam's laptop or your build server, create it, and this will give you a valid AWS API key. Attacker finds this on a system, they're going to use it to authenticate to AWS to see how much access they have with that key. And as soon as they try and do that, it's going to trigger an alert in your console, and you're going to know the attacker was on Sam's laptop or wherever you placed that token. This is targeting our AWS infrastructure that we monitor. So even if you don't use AWS, you can still use this token. Attackers don't know what your infrastructure looks like. And I guarantee you, if they find this, they're going to try and use it, and then you get that alert. We have tokens like the credit card token. This is a real credit card that you can save inside of, like one password on a finance server or finance account. And if the credit card is ever used in a transaction, that'll trigger an alert. So let's say I'm going to put it on Sam's laptop or Sam's one password account. Create the token. That gives me a valid credit card, and I can quickly simulate a transaction here to see what the alert would look like. Card number, it's got the expiry date, CVS or security code. So I'll simulate, and then there we can see what that alert looks like. So credit card token was triggered, and we've got the reminder of Sam's one password. So that card only existed in Sam's one password, which means my one password account was compromised, and potentially some other stuff along the way as well. So the main thing with the tokens, there's lots of different options here. We've got tokens that can detect phishing attacks. So very popular is like the Entra ID login token, detects if someone's doing adversary in the middle phishing attacks against Entra ID, and detects lots of those attacks. So over time, you can deploy lots of tokens, extending your detection capabilities. Right, that's everything from me. So I'll give back to Laura. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. I've only seen the one question, which was from Alex, and that was what's the practical difference between honeypots and canaries, which I think hopefully we've sort of covered that, but just for clarity, historically honeypots you had to build, you had to build your server, you had to maintain the server, you had to patch it, you had to, and then interact for people to interact with it. Whereas this is much more lightweight, as Sam said in his demonstration. This is an emulator, so it's really easy to change what they are. It's really easy to have it emulate various different things. There's no real maintenance of that needs to be ongoing, and you're not having to actually deploy actual servers, which are what honeypots were historically, and that's why we really like the Canaries and the concept of it. We've also seen, just for reference, we've also seen through pen testing that it really does get results. The pen testers just can't help themselves, frankly, in terms of, oh, I've seen this file server, I've seen the vulnerabilities, I'm going to go after this, or some of the files that have triggered. So so yeah, we've in the wash up of pen tests, we've had conversations around where else can we see them, because we get really good results with it. I know we're at the top of the time, so is there any more questions from anyone else? Seems not. Well, thank you, Sam. Brilliant demo, so thank you very much. And any questions, just reach out to us, and we'll happily follow up. So thank you everyone for attending. Have a good day.